started because I hate for all of you to be delayed. Is it important what we're going to do today? You better believe it. And the next time you have to swear and raise your hand and swear that you tell the truth, the whole truth, and all, nothing but the truth, you're going to make sure that you absolutely abide by the code of ethics, that you know the code of ethics, you live it every day, what you do, and that you'd be able to say that you're very aware of the provisions in the code of ethics. That's what we're going to do today. Let me pull up the screen. And it is important because we are subject to abiding by the code of ethics, and as realtors, right? So what we're going to what we're going to do today is I'm going to review the code of ethics. On all the handouts that I gave the actual code of ethics for 2024, and then we're going to take a little quiz. And since none of you have it, we're all going to make 100 as I go through it on something like that. So, and then we're going to talk about the pathways to professionalism. Now, the code of ethics, I'm going to go through some Cliff Notes version, but right now I just need to let you know how it's really broken down. The preamble is the golden rule, right? And that's do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so we do live by the golden rule. We strive to be prime examples of the golden rule in our, not only in our business life, but also in our personal life. Now, the Articles 1 through 9 are duties we owe to clients and customers, okay? And then Articles 10 through 14 are duties to the public. Advertising's in Article 12. And then Articles 15 through 17 are duties to realtors, okay? So we have 3 articles that are dealing with that. Now, just a little brief remembrance of it. Article 1, the SOPs are the standards of practice. So if you look at the article and you read the article, then they give you standards of practice that'll help you apply it in certain situations, right? But the articles are what complainants file against us that we violated an article. Now, in Article 1, standard of practice 1 through 8, it put into place that, say, for instance, a buyer agent submitted an offer and the seller countered. The seller, the listing broker, can request verification that the seller's counter had been delivered. So within 2 days, you would have to respond, or your broker would. Okay. Now, Article 10-5 standard of practice was changed when they saw a 9,000% increase in a violation of the code of ethics with somebody posting disparaging remarks, discriminatory remarks, and everything. And so they changed it. And it used to be that we had to behave properly only during the course of the transaction. Well, now they removed that. We're subject to it 24 hours a day. And none of you are worried about that because y'all all perfect. And then Article 12, the standard of practice, and we put this into play once it came out in 2018, that you can never represent our services are free. And that's from a buyer agent or a tenant agent on something like that. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to review the Cliff Notes for the Code of Ethics. If anybody has any questions, all you have to do is take yourself off mute and ask me, okay? So again, the preamble is the golden rule, right? Everybody knows what Cliff Notes are. That's like not reading them, but I'm going to give you the summary of each one of the articles. Okay.
Yes.
Some people
Yes.
didn't know what Cliff Notes were, so I just want to let you know. Then Articles 1 through 9 are duties to clients and customers. So when we go through them, kind of think of that. It's not just our clients, it would be customers, the party on the other side of the transaction. And then Articles 10 through 14 are duties to the public, what the consumer would see, what the public would see. And then Articles 15 through 17 are duties to realtors. Now, I am going to tell you, Mitch was right next to me as sitting on the Professional Standards Committee. We are required to take a lot of courses in order to sit on the hearing panel or the grievance tribunal for code of ethics violations. And so he and I sat through a 6-hour course, and it's really interesting. The whole Texas winter meetings, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that next month. There was a theme between the session for fair housing, the code of ethics, for the expert panel of the attorneys for Texas Realtors, TREC and such. And the thing really was to be considerate and to be kind. And we'll go through a lot of things, the pathways to professionalism. That's the way we should be. And I'm going to tell you, I've been licensed since 1993, sometimes before people were born, right, that are now in real estate. And that's just fine. But in the last, I'd say, 5 or 7 years, I've seen more things written that realtors would send to the other realtor that were horrifying. Nobody in their right mind would do that. These are people who obviously don't have any control over their behavior because they were appalling. And when we brought it to the attention of one of the brokers, they said, well, they were just very upset. Well, I don't care if you're upset or not, but you're not going to put something like that in writing. That removes all doubt, the individual you are. And again, I've told y'all before, don't put it in writing. If you have to scream or yell out something, take a pillow, yell into the pillow, then fluff the pillow and put it back on the couch or something. But we're not going to play this game of being rude or overstepping our boundaries with the other party. So Article 1, I'm going to talk about case studies. Now, these are not actual hearings that I participated in or whatever. These are case studies that we were given during our 6-hour training class, okay? And you'll find that when I give you an example of one of them, and we'll talk a little bit more about it, you may have your own opinion too about how you would think about this complaint, the individual who complained, and then the respondent, which is usually our realtor in that. So Article 1 is absolute fidelity to client. And we did this not too many months ago, talking about whose interest is first.
Okay.
Our clients, always, right? And that's really the crux of it. We're always going to be utmost in our fiduciary duty to our clients, serving the clients' needs, right? Not ours, but the clients. And we have to be we have to deal honestly with customers, right? But
yes, ma'am.
When they're our client, we are absolutely faithful to them and uphold them. Okay, their things. Article 2. Now, I'm going to take both of these articles together because that's one of the case studies that we had, and it said avoid exaggeration and misrepresentation. Well, I'm going to tell you a lot of the complaints come in with that in the number 1 article. Okay, so now I'm going to frame the case study, and then you can take yourself off of mute and tell me what you would think. Here's the scenario. The buyer filed a complaint. Okay, the buyer had told the buyer agent in writing that they had certain requirements. They didn't have a lot of money to spend and do upgrades, so whatever they had to acquire, the property they would buy, had to be move-in ready. And one of it was they had to have usable hardwood floors because their children had allergies. And he said that he would look at homes that had carpeting, but they would have to have usable hardwood floors. Well, guess what didn't have usable hardwood floors?
Their bedrooms?
The property they bought.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so what happened was the buyer complained, saying that the buyer agent did not represent his best interest, and he was misrepresenting the condition of the hardwood floors. So it was passed on because the grievance tribunal looks at what the complainants send and what they say. if there's a slight possibility that the respondent, the realtor, could have violated the code of ethics, they forward it on to a hearing panel. So again, they take it at face value. So here's
They not
what
see that it was carpet on the floors.
there's carpeting there, but he had said the floors underneath had to be hardwood and they had to be usable.
Okay.
Right. He would look at those with carpeting, but the floors underneath had to be usable. So
Gotcha.
then the respondent, when it went to the hearing panel, the respondent says, look, I went to the seller. He was a for sale by owner. Oh, wow. All of us are cringing at that point, right? And he said he went to the seller and the seller says, when the buyer agent said, what condition are the hardwood floors underneath the carpeting? Oh, they're in great condition. Well, he sent back a communication to the buyer that said the floors are in great condition. Whoops. And then he said he assumed that they were in usable condition.
Assume. I know how to spell assume.
Yep, me too.
Yes.
So tell me what you think the buyer agent really should have done and what kind of advice would they have given the buyer?
The buyer should have gone and checked out the house themselves to make sure that the floors were there were hardwood floors in usable condition.
Well, here's the problem. The respondent, the realtor said, well, I told him to get an inspection. He said he didn't have money. He didn't want an inspection. I said, well, it doesn't matter. The inspector would never have turned up the condition of the floors under carpet. They don't pull it back. That buyer agent would have had to tell the buyer, look, you're going to need to get permission from the seller to pull back that carpeting during the termination option, and you determine if the floors were in usable condition.
Absolutely.
And then if say for instance, the seller came back and said, I won't let you do that, what would your advice in writing been to that buyer?
I'm here to walk.
There you go.
Another house.
There you go. Yeah, walk away or not the house. What's interesting is when individuals file complaints at TREC against us, as well as the Code of Ethics at Texas Realtors, they're always thinking we're going to just fork over a bunch of money to them. Because they kept saying, I just need the $7,000 it cost me. When he pulled back the carpeting, the floor man said that the hardwood floors were stained with urine, head stains, as well as water stains. Okay. I'm just going to be real positive. In general, would you ever trust anything a seller said or a listing agent said about the condition of the property?
No, that's why I said the buyer's agent should have gone and checked it out and said, I wouldn't have considered the house if it had carpet.
Well, that's the other thing.
The buyer was saying the kids have allergies. They needed a house where the floors were already, the hardwood floors were in good condition, ready to go, no carpeting.
That's the thing too. I guess maybe there weren't enough properties to show the buyer, and the buyer was wanting to do that. The buyer agreed to look at that, but make no mistake, that should never ever have been a situation where a buyer would think that a buyer agent had a duty. That buyer agent would never have gone to inspect those floors, ever. They're not allowed to.
Absolutely. That's not a hat you can wear.
Yeah, no. And asking the seller, what they should have done is send it back to an email to the buyer and say, look, I just asked the seller. They said they're in great condition, but I wouldn't take their word for it. And neither should you. We need to ask permission for you to pull them up and have a floor person come in during your termination option and determine if the floors are usable.
Absolutely.
And most sellers are not going to let you pull up carpeting. I'm just going to say.
Exactly.
They're not. And so, and that's fine, but the buyer had to be told that in writing, and they were not. So the buyer agent failed to really represent the true situation to the buyer. I don't think they gave the buyer good advice on something like that. And that was unfortunate, because during that case study, it was obvious that it was not handled well in benefit of the buyer. So the buyer, in the case study, passing it on to a hearing panel was a very good thing to do. Article 3, cooperate.
Did the outcome come? Did the agent have to pay for the floors to be done or?
No money would ever happen. Now, during
Oh.
mediation, if the parties
Uh-huh.
decided to mediate, they could decide to give money at that time. But there's no money from the Texas Realtors
Oh, okay.
ever, and neither from TREC. You know, that is only done through mediation or through litigation on the matters and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
And again, there was no right or wrong answer, as the attorney told us, but we need to show what penalty we would enforce in the event we found that the realtor had been in violation of the articles and that type of thing. Article 3, cooperate. Well, let me just say this. Cooperate. Is that about compensation?
Cooperate is cooperate. Cooperate with showings, cooperate with communicating to both sides.
But it's not compensation. That's what I
No.
wanted to draw.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, cooperate means that you're going to work in the best interest of your client and be cooperative with the other side of the transaction. Doesn't mean you don't have your client's best interest. It's just you're going to cooperate. Article 4, true position disclosed to buyers and sellers. That's always very critical. We're never going to withhold any information about our whose party we represent, all these different types of things. We're always going to disclose a true position. Buyers and sellers need to know that. That's not something we hide from them. Article 5 is disclose self-interest.
Marilyn,
Are
are we supposed to be seeing what you're discussing?
Yes.
We don't see it.
You don't see that? You don't see the code of ethics up? Cliff
We
Notes?
just see the first page, the preamble, golden
The
rule
outline, yeah. That's
outline.
the outline.
Okay, let's see if I can.
Thank you.
Can you see? Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's better.
There we go.
Okay, so Article 5 is disclose self-interest. And I'll tell you how we see this happen where violations, and I see it a lot because I do compliance for quite 11 operations for KW. For instance, a buyer decides to purchase a property in their LLC's name, and that buyer is a license holder. And they fail to tell the seller that they're a license holder. The law says differently, and we have it in paragraph 8A of the contract for that reason. The other thing I'm going to tell you that I've seen, which is, I'm going to bring it up because I think it's more applicable. We've had some situations where a listing agent has a property on the market and they haven't gotten any offers. The sellers are getting nervous, they're anxious. They really want an offer and they get very upset and they said, you know, really, I just need to get this property sold, right? So the listing agent goes back and thinks about it and says, you know what? I'll buy it. Can you be a buyer in a transaction and also the listing agent?
That doesn't sound right.
Never.
Yeah.
No, never. And that's what has happened. We've had listing agents who think they can be a buyer in the transaction and the seller still, no. The problem was you had to terminate your listing. There is no
Because
way.
you already got fiduciary, you got information from the seller that gives you advantage over the seller. You know, he didn't told you what they need. He didn't told you everything confidential.
It's a very disturbing scenario. And the reason I bring that up is because we've had some of those, especially when they mishandle it. So if you ever get faced with that situation, you're going to get clarity before proceeding. Article 6
Gotcha.
is compensation disclosed to principals. Yeah, we do that. Our forms are very transparent in Texas Realtors. I had an agent contact me this morning. The seller closed on Friday, and the sellers were notified that they may participate in a class action lawsuit against their listing agent. And she said, how do I respond? I said, well, first off, you're going to tell them that you have no idea if this applies to them or not. But by the way, it won't apply because in the state of Texas, our forms are very transparent and you approved and negotiated and acknowledged all the terms. And that's the truth.
Gotcha.
So, you know, these class actions, they're just going after every transaction that shows it's closed. You know, anything that's been filed and recorded, man, they go after it, trying to get the sellers to all come after us. Well, good luck on that. I'd hate to have a seller on the stand and say, is this your initials? Is this your signature on it? And please don't tell me you didn't read it before you signed and dated. I mean,
Yeah.
really, yeah, it's just ridiculous. Article 7, compensation known to all. If you're receiving compensation from more than one party, yeah, they all have to know that type of transaction. They have to know where the compensation is within the course of the transaction at all times on something like that. Article 8, do not commingle funds. Does somebody want to tell me what commingle means?
Yep, when you put monies from the transaction, whatever, in your person, with your personal money. Whenever your personal money is next to your client's money, it should not be in the same spot.
Never, ever.
Never.
Article 9, this is the last one of duties to clients and customers. It says put commitments in writing. Okay. I can still remember 20 years ago, people were upset that they had to sign a buyer tenant agreement. I said, well, that may be, but you'd have to tell your buyers, you take an oath, you're upholding the code of ethics, and you cannot violate the code of ethics. And it says all your commitments will be in writing. Your listing agreements, your buyer tenant agreements. There's nothing unless it's in writing, period, on something like that. Now we're going to get into the duties to the public. Article 10, provide equal service to all. Absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more about that in April during Fair Housing Month. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the session that we had with Fair Housing. We were very fortunate. They brought in the director. The Texas Workforce Commission, the Civil Rights Division, upholds the Code of Ethics, not Code of Ethics, HUD, Fair Housing for the government. And so in Texas, there was a director and these investigators that were on the panel. They were absolutely awesome. And it was early in the morning, but that room was filled with tons of property managers, brokers who have property managers and those type of things. And their information was just incredible. But again, we provide equal service to all, period. Article 11, competent level of service. Oh, yeah. And this in the state of Texas, TREC has the broker responsibility rules that you don't get to do anything unless your broker has deemed that you have geographic competence as well as competence to handle a transaction. And TREC changed it that any agent they have under their brokerage, you have to directly supervise the first 3 types of transactions that they've done. The first 3 listing agreements for sale, first 3 lease listing agreements, first 3 contracts for purchase, and first 3 contracts representing a tenant. So TREC has embroiled a ton of requirements from the TREC side, but we are obligated through the Code of Ethics to have competent level of service, period. Article 12, this one, we get so many of these where usually we're turned in by somebody who's another realtor or agent who actually knows the requirements, but it's present a true picture in advertising. And what TREC has told us is when they created this provision to try and expedite the advertising violations through TREC, they go to the agent or the brokerage and they say, I give you X number of days to correct this. And then and they say their percentage is 90-something% plus, where the correction is made right away, so they don't have to proceed forward with the complaint. which is a very good opportunity on some. Article 13, avoid practicing law. Oh, really? You're not going to practice law. In fact, somebody who is a practicing attorney, they can only wear one hat in the course of the transaction. That would be as a realtor. Definitely not as somebody who is an attorney giving advice during the course of representing the seller or the buyer. Article 14.
Can we go back to the present true picture in advertising? Is that related to virtual staging?
Everything, correct.
Okay. Because I guess my question is, if a seller takes pictures when they have like their furniture in the home, and then they decide to move it out because they're in the process of maybe purchasing another home, and when folks go to see the home, it's cleared out. It sounds to me that it's similar to a virtual staging situation where there's pictures there, but then when you get there, it's vacant.
The furniture don't come with the house. You're not selling furniture, you're selling
Yes,
the.
I don't think so. Now, what I do find, the furnishings are not real property. But
Yeah.
I do have a problem if real property is removed, such as the chandeliers were removed, and there are beautiful pictures in MLS
Right.
chandelier in their brochure. That I have a problem with. But
Right.
property, the personal property is not conveyed. So I'm not as concerned with that. And that's not really what our case studies have been in the past, where the agent has exaggerated or maybe used virtual staging and didn't place the banner on each photo stating that this is not the true picture, it's staging, virtual staging and stuff like that.
Okay.
Article 14, place facts before hearing panel. Yes, we are obligated that in the event somebody complains against us, as a respondent, we would always provide the facts to the hearing panel so that they can make a good decision regarding the disposition of the complaint. Okay, the next three articles are duties we owe to realtors, right? And Article 15 is avoid misleading others. Well, I'm going to give you the one example that we get a lot. The buyer agent just showed the buyer the property. The buyer's real excited. They want to make an offer. So the buyer agent contacts the listing agent and says, do you have any other offers that you've received right now? And the listing agent said, oh yeah, your buyer better really sharpen their pencil and come in with a real high offer because I've got all these, right? And turns out it's not true. And how we know, I know how one situation turned out when the buyer agent went back to the buyer and said, this is really strange. This property's been on the market 80+ days and now they have multiple offers. You know, I just don't feel that they're telling us the true picture, right? The true story of this. Well, the buyer, without the buyer agent knowing, the buyer went and knocked on the door of the seller. And the seller found out that the listing agent had lied. Yeah. So we don't tell our buyers to go do that. First off, I'd never tell anybody to go knock on a door. It's bad enough for you to knock on a door with an appointment, right? To show properties, things like that happen. But many times we don't know. And you do have a right to ask the listing broker to confirm that. They have 2 days to respond, not calendar days, not business days, 2 calendar days. What we did see a lot in the case studies were where the listing broker or the cooperating broker failed to respond to the other side within 2 days. And Trek had said, turn them in. And I'm thinking, my gosh, we'd be spending all our time turning people in, right? Where it did play to our advantage is we had proof that we reached out to them and they never responded to us. Now they got into serious trouble on something like that. Article 16, respect agency. Here's what this means, folks. That means that when you meet an individual who's property is listed with another brokerage, you are not going to try and tell them, you know, they need to get rid of their other broker and come with them, and they'll give a compensation to them, a part of their commit. You know what I'm saying? We get those all the time. And I'll tell you what's interesting, almost everybody, and I've done this with, you know, thousands of agents already. Almost all of them had a story that was very similar. And the one I thought that was most egregious was we had a buyer under a buyer tenant agreement. The buyer went to a party, and the host was trying to say, you know, they're going to join, blah, blah, blah. And there was a license holder attending, and the license holder went up to them and said, well, did your agent give you money? Are they giving you part of their compensation? And the buyer said, no. And they said, well, if you get rid of them, I'll give you part of the compensation. So it was real blatant, because the buyers went back to the buyer agent and tried to say, we want to terminate if you don't give us money. Man, I tell you, they fired off a complaint. The second part is the broker thought that was just fine. Oh, the agent didn't mean anything by it. We had a situation in Katy where there was an agent, not from KW, thank God, sitting out in front of a new home, model home. And as buyers, prospects, right? As the customers were going in, they said, if you sign up with me and let me represent you, I'll give you part of my compensation. And they unfortunately did it to one of our clients, right? It causes major problems on something like that. And no builder should allow that. Man, they should go out there and ask them to please, you know, leave, that this is not an appropriate place. You know, you don't prospect at open houses, folks, unless you are the host hosting the open house, right? A very different scenario. And the last one is submit controversies to arbitration. Arbitration deals with compensation, the disputes between principal firms regarding compensation. That arbitration is binding, and we're required to do it. And it has been very unfortunate when we've been involved in arbitrations and we find out that our client that we had and the other broker stepped in to take them to the finish line, interfered with our agreement. But when we find out that the buyers had lied to the buyer agent number 2, you know, buyers don't tell the truth. Neither do sellers, folks. And I can tell you, I looked at 13 sellers disclosures early this morning. They're perfect homes. If that doesn't tell you what you need to tell your clients, they should never take anything that they're given as a disclosure as being truthful. They must independently verify, period. You need to do a much better job scaring the, you know what, out of them. Okay. So now we are going to take a little quiz. Can everybody see the quiz?
Yeah.
Okay, great. The Code of Ethics is based on the concept of let the public be served.
Yes.
That's the response. The Code of Ethics was adopted to establish standards of conduct for the industry. The preamble to the code sets out aspirational ideals that realtors should strive to attain. Absolutely. 4, the code is primarily enforced through, well, their response from NAR was the local associations. But here in Texas, a few years ago, all the local associations transferred that authority to the Texas Realtors, to the state association for handling. Number 5, the 2 basic types of complaints that are handled by local associations are ethics complaints. We just went through all of those. Request for arbitration. That was Article 17. Number 6, the 3 committees or groups that are involved in the code enforcement process are, number 1, the grievance committee. They get that complaint and they look at it on the face of it and determine if there's a possibility that a realtor violated the code of ethics. Professional Standards Committee will then have a hearing panel based upon what the grievance tribunal determines, right? And then after the hearing is concluded, all of the findings go back down to the board of directors at the local level, and they have to sign off on what the standards, professional standards hearing panel has made a determination of it. 7, a request for mandatory arbitration is based on a monetary dispute between realtors, principals in different firms, okay? A request for arbitration is most commonly based on a dispute about a cooperative selling commission. Number 9, the concept of procuring cause is used to decide commission disputes and arbitration cases. We have 27 points that we have to look at that could be a possibility to help us determine procuring cause. Not easy at all. It says, which of the following statements is true about the concept of procuring cause? It's no predetermined rules of entitlement are allowed to be used by a hearing panel. Procuring cause is difficult to prove and to review. So it's that series of events that are uninterrupted that lead to a successful closing. And so we see all sorts of situations that come up, but it's not predetermined. Everything has to be reviewed very closely. Number 10, realtors have an obligation to protect and promote the interest of their clients, but also have an obligation to treat all parties. What would you say?
Fairly and honestly.
Honestly.
Fairly and honestly, right?
Fairly and
Honestly.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
And I'll tell you why. It's not fairly and honestly, it's honestly.
Oh.
And I'll tell you why. It used to be, that's what we always said, but the problem is the predetermination of what is fair could that be different for your buyer and their buyer agent? Yeah, see, it's subjective.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but treating them honestly would incorporate being fair. There you go. So, number 11, if a listing broker tells another broker, I'll cooperate with you, the other broker may not assume that the listing broker will pay him or her a cooperative commission. Number 12, a cooperating broker in a transaction may claim to have sold the property involved in the transaction and post a sold sign on the property involved in the transaction after the closing with a buyer's permission. And the last one, 13, disciplinary action in an ethics complaint may not include a written apology. We can fine them, we can put a letter of reprimand in their file, and we can require them to attend educational classes, but we can never force a respondent to do a written apology. Pretty hard to believe, huh? Yeah. Okay, and we've had some complaints where people say, I want a formal letter of apology. Well, they may want that, but we can't force that on from the professional standards, the hearing panel. Okay, moving right along, we're going to do the pathway to professionalism, and this is respect. It's respect for the public, respect for property, and respect for peers, right? And as I said, all of you are perfect, so I know that none of you ever violate this, ever, right? Everybody should shake their head and say, yes, Marilyn, we're perfect. We know we're. Okay, we're not perfect, but we strive to obtain these wonderful goals. So
Yes.
I'll make sure they get all these documents to you, but I'm not going to read it to you, but I'm going to highlight some that still keep coming up from time to time. Again, respect for the public is a golden rule. I had one agent in one of the classes, and she said, Marilyn, it's common sense. We should all act that way. Why would why would anybody have a problem treating somebody the wrong way? I said, well,
Everybody don't have common sense.
not only common sense, some of them are just not,
I have
thinking.
a quick comment. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the neighborhood website, all your neighborhood. And
Yeah.
somebody filed a complaint, put a complaint on there. It says, just want to let y'all know there's this 2 young ladies working for agent so-and-so with Keller Williams. I said, and they're facing the wrong way on a one-way street, blocking traffic, putting up signs. I had to forward that to Michael.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, it was close to downtown. I assume it was Midtown. I forgot what, I think Crawford Street, one of the downtown streets.
Oh, my word.
Yeah,
That's also dangerous to do something like that.
very, yeah.
I can
But-
still remember our brokerage would, every Monday, we had tons of complaints because everybody did these open houses and they put
Mhm.
directional signs on people's property that it wasn't their open house, right? It was a directional sign. And they,
Mhm,
instead
right.
of putting all these different, every Monday. And then we had an agent who had a complaint. Somebody took a photograph as she's driving to an open house. She had all these inflated balloons in the car and they were obstructing the rear view mirror and everything.
Oh, gosh.
You know.
I know a lot of
Yes.
these subdivisions don't have easements. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's really hard to put a sign somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be very careful about that. But respect for the public, what they're talking about is communicate properly. If you're have to cancel an appointment, remember you don't enter a property without an appointment, even if it's vacant. And if you're running late, then you must call and recancel and reschedule. Don't ever appear to view a property with your clients outside of the appointed time, period.
Marilyn, I always adhere to that ever since you told us way back in the day about that. I think it was the client who got shot because the homeowner had came home and he thought all the showings were over and he was upstairs taking a shower and he got out of the shower and he looked downstairs and looked like somebody was in his house and he shot them,
Yep,
so.
I represented both of the Keller Williams office, the office that had the listing and the office where the visitor was shot by the homeowner because they entered the property after the appointed time.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was a dangerous situation. We're lucky he wasn't killed.
Yeah.
Marilyn, I have a question. What about prior to your time? Like this just happened to me Saturday. My clients have cameras and the buyer agent had a 2:00 appointment and they went into the house at 1:38.
No,
And
you
my
can.
clients, they text me and told me what happened. And I saw it too on my Supra.
Mhm. Yeah, no, they can't go in. You can only go in during your appointed time. That's very unfortunate that they did that.
Yes, thank you.
Very unfortunate. When entering a property, ensure that unexpected situations such as pets are handled properly. Well, really, the listing agent really needs to advise you properly. I think I've told you the situation. I don't think it seems funny now, but it wasn't at the time when we had somebody showing the property. The buyers decided they wanted to go outside to look at the backyard and the patio and the pool and stuff. And when they opened the door, a cat ran in. So what do you think the buyer agent assumed?
They assumed the cat belonged there.
And when the sellers got home that night, the cat had ripped up everything, all the cushions and torn, yeah. You can't assume anything. And personally, cats are not easy to herd, to gather up and go and you could be subject to all that. So anyway, it's very unfortunate. Never criticize the property in the presence of the occupant. I'm going to tell you right now, you never criticize the property. You are always being recorded and videoed, period. You should make that assumption. Make no mistake. I don't care what they say. You're going to assume that that's the case because that's exactly what happens. And you won't criticize that property. That would be something that you would have confidential with your client in a different time. When showing an occupied home, always ring the doorbell or knock. Oh, big time, right? Yeah, we want to make sure. I'm going to tell you what happened years and years ago. We used to, when I first was in real estate, we had a small local brokerage. And every Thursday after our team meeting, we would go to look at our listings for the office, right? And so the listing agent was describing the property and everything, and she was going to open the door to one of the bedrooms so we could all go in when the teenage son was sprawled naked on the bed.
Yep.
Yep, he failed to go to school that day. You just never know. I cannot tell you all the things I have seen personally when showing properties. It would make some of you probably laugh so hard you would have a heart attack. But they do happen. It's just unfortunate. We have to be prepared for it. The other thing is be respectful. This being considerate, remember, be considerate and kind. That was kind of like it. Be aware of respect for cultural differences. Show courtesy and respect to everyone. We've had buyers agents who are showing buyers, and they made a comment about the decorations that was very disparaging. And of course, the sellers heard that. Yeah. So be very considerate about that. Be aware of and meet all deadlines, absolutely. Promise only what you can deliver, and you're going to keep your promises. We're going to hold you to that. If you said it and you said you'd do it, you are going to do it. And I like this one. It says, do not tell people what you think. Tell them what you know. And sometimes we give our opinions on something, and I love it. When I used to tell the buyers, look, this is a list of all the issues that you're telling that you're, for this property. It seems a little bit overwhelming for you. Maybe you should decide to terminate and go find another property. And when they said, well, we really want this property. Well, you may really want the property, but I'm going to advise you that you're going to take on a lot of risk and a lot of work on doing something like that. And it was always when they called me back after they bought the property, they would call me and say, you know what, you're absolutely right. We made the worst decision on earth. And I'm thinking, thank God I have all that in writing. Okay, respect for property. Yeah, when you're showing it, you're going to leave it in the same condition as you found it, right?
Yeah.
Now, what I am going to tell you, and we've unfortunately had too many situations like this. If you go into a property and something just doesn't look right, it looks in disarray maybe, or something doesn't look right, you're going to back up, close it up, and contact the listing agent immediately. And we've had some unfortunate situations like that, but don't go forward and don't drag your buyer into it. We had a situation where a seller left drug paraphernalia all on the dining room table. They
left what?
Their drug paraphernalia. Yeah. Not smart. Leaving the property in the same condition. We had an agent who flipped a switch and didn't know what the switch was. And that switch was the fireplace, the automatic fireplace in the summertime, and it burned up the HVAC unit.
Oh my God. Yikes.
And today we're going to have 87 degrees. I feel like we're almost in the summertime. It's horrible to think it's just.
Yes. Marilyn, I showed a house that had a gun. The gun was out. They had forgot to put the gun away.
I know, we've had that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
it was weird. It was like a dining room chair instead of, on the table or something. It was weird. It's like, why was it even there? It was weird. Yeah.
That is not acceptable under any circumstance.
I immediately called the agent and told her told her to call the seller and let her know that gun is there. And we're getting ready to leave in case they have any showings, and please come back and take care of it so nobody else encountered.
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing it says, don't eat, drink, smoke, dispose of trash, use bathing or sleeping facilities, or bring pets. Bottom line is you don't get to use the restroom facilities either. Never. We had one where the buyer agent let the buyers do it and then it overflowed. So when the sellers got
Oof.
home, that was a
Oh,
problem.
yeah.
Yeah, and that the buyer didn't want to be responsible for it, so the buyer agent had to be responsible for it because they had done something they're never allowed to do. You have to wait till you can get to a Whataburger or, Circle K or a Buc-ee's, right?
Okay.
The other one is obtain permission before photographing, videographing, or streaming the interiors or exteriors of properties. You're never allowed to do that. You have to have written permission from the seller in order to do that, period. And I'm going to tell you, be careful if you have properties that are particularly gorgeous, right? We have agents in Houston making an appointment, acting like they have a client that they want to see the property or they're, previewing it. And then they bring a film crew in and they're doing their advertising in that property. Oh, it's absolutely outrageous. It's frightening. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Some people are just not using good sense here. Respect for peers. Well, I'm ending this session the same way I started, being considerate and being kind. And you respond to each other promptly. While Trek says we have to do it within 2 days, yeah, well, common sense says you're going to do it more timely than that, right? You can never be absent in that respect. It says contact the listing broker if there appears to be a discrepancy in the listing information. Well, first off, you're going to contact the listing agent and say that, we found this to be conflicting information, discrepancies, whatever, on that, something like that. Again, everybody's being videoed, recorded, the whole bit. So everybody's going to be on their best behavior. Show courtesy and trust others. That's what I've been appalled by. Other realtors saying horrible things in emails and texts to our agents. That's just ridiculous. Avoid the inappropriate use of endearments or other denigrating language. Yeah, we've had brokers in Houston that have displayed that, which is never acceptable on any type of situation like that. Do not prospect at other realtors' open houses or similar events. And that's kind of what the example was that we were talking about with realtors who interfere with our agency relationship, right? I mean, that's just not the right thing to do, period, right? Secure the property always, put everything back, return the keys and whatever. And the last one says real estate is a reputation business. What you do today may affect your reputation and business for years to come. And this one was updated last year on something like this. But why is it good? Well, the broker has to go through this. They have to prove that they've reviewed the code of ethics with the agents. We do it in every one of our training. As I said, you're going to raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and you're going to say, not only do I live my life with the golden rule, I uphold the code of ethics. My broker always encourages me to uphold the code of ethics. We do that. And what's so weird about it, and one of my attorneys and I've had these big discussions with these huge class action suits, and especially the verdict that we got last year in October. They want to ruin NAR. They want to put them out of business, not just ruin MLS. They want to ruin NAR. And I'm thinking, they have the code of ethics. Now, Trek has certain criteria that we have to be competent and all these, a few things, but not the code of ethics. That's higher than the law sometimes, the way that we are required to behave on something like that. So it just amazes me that they want to destroy it, because the reason the code of ethics was incorporated was they found that there wasn't a standard of realtors in transactions. There was no real standard up to uphold, a really good standard. And that's why they came. They wanted to be aspirational goals of how we conduct ourselves and those types of things on something like that. So, being considerate and being kind, I'm going to tell you, when they're low, they go low, we're going to go higher.
Yeah.
Always take the high road. And I'm telling you, I have seen some pretty horrific things that other realtors have said about our agents. And I had a broker, and if I said her name, you would all know who she is. She, in an email back to our agent, the broker, the team leader, and everything, said that that agent was not a good representative of Keller Williams.
Wow.
I didn't respond because I was afraid I would violate the code of ethics. So I didn't respond, but she may have thought that, but that's not her place to say that. And especially
Absolutely.
it all over the place. That was not acceptable. What she was found to misstate, she misstated some things. She wasn't clear on it. She should have gotten clarification before she said something. That's the way we all live our lives in real estate, right? We just don't say something, we know something. And in order for us to know it, we have to verify it. We have to get clarification on it many times. And I think the other thing that in the code of ethics training that we did for 6 hours, Mitch was right next to me, and our Apple Watches kept going off every hour saying time to stand, right? It seems almost impossible that we would have a 6-hour course about complaints. It's just frightening. But half the group, I must admit, I tend to always be at a table that wants to hang, drawn, and quarter the realtors. We seem to be a little bit more instructive with education classes they should be taking. We're not happy if they've done, certain things like that. Doesn't matter if I joined the table after it was filled with people, or if I'm there and then the table filled in. And we had all these people from all over the state, which was great. It's a little different perspective on that. But bottom line is, we really always need to take the high road on something like this. We need to be positive. And, we don't know what they're going through. Sometimes they just feel that's just how they are. Well, in those cases, we're just going to add them to our prayer list, I guess, so that they find peace and quit taking it out on everybody involved in a transaction. But bottom line is, we always need to err on the side of being kind and considerate. Not taking abuse, though.
Right.
And I'm going to give you an example. I had an agent 10 years in the business, not a new agent. She knows what she's doing. She had a listing, and it was court ordered, and she was chosen, right? They chose her to do the listing. It was a very, very difficult situation. She called me one night, and she was upset. She had a panic attack and went into the hospital because the seller was driving her crazy. And when she called me, I said, well, why didn't you terminate last year? You knew this from August. She said, I'm not a quitter. And I said, well, this is not about you quitting. This is about you making good business decisions, not to help somebody. She said, I knew I could help them. Yeah, you can't fix them. You can't go in thinking you're going to fix these people, right? Once they reveal who they are, sometimes you have to make a tough decision, but she put up with way too much abuse. I can't even go into the details. They were so horrible what that seller had done. Absolutely horrible. And so when she sent the termination notice, they sent back and they wanted the broker to appoint somebody else. I said, good luck on that one when you tell that party that the broker's going to appoint to take over your listing what this seller has done. And even the attorney, the power of attorney for all of them, they all complained about him and said, we can't put up with him anymore. Somebody is going to have to come in and take over and be really strong. And I thought, I think this person it's not about strength there. It's about this seller not being a good person, period. You're not going to change that. And I know I've done court ordered bankruptcies and all these different things, divorces there's a reason people get a divorce. They don't agree to anything. They're very difficult situations. And so just you can be kind and considerate, but just make sure you don't subject yourself to abuse. Okay, and it comes in all forms of, it can be verbal, it can be subtle almost, right? That they're manipulating and doing those type of things. But take good care of yourself. That's not the place. And if you don't know how, I know how to fire people. And you always make it that it's your fault, right? And I was very blessed. I worked for major Fortune 500 companies, and the training that I was given was just invaluable. And I learned this early on. One of my managers said, they said, Marilyn, we're going to have you fire them. I said, why me? They're not even in my department. No, this will be good for you. I said, how could that be good for me? Just because I was an officer of Marsh & McLennan doesn't mean I, can step in and do all this. But they said, no, it'll be good for you to do this. And so, it caused me concern because, again, that's not easy to do, folks. But I was very grateful for it because I told them, I said, it's been revealed to me that I can no longer, it's me. It sounded like I'm the problem, right? Not the fact that you don't ever respond to my emails, that you call me bad names, that you hang up on me all the time, you're disrespectful. I didn't say all those things. I just said it's been revealed to me that I'm not the one for you. You need to go find another realtor. I wish you the very best. And by signing this, I'm releasing you to go find another realtor.
Mhm.
Yeah. You just have to make those hard decisions. It's important to do that. In life and stuff like that. And we all know we've been faced with personal decisions a lot of times that we've had to make that's hard, right? It's hard
Yep.
because it hurts us and we know it's going to hurt them, but a lot of times it hurts us as much, right? My son, who now has an only child, and Christopher just turned 9. It's hard to believe. My son will say to me, Mom, I remember when you used to just say, this hurts you more than it hurt me. He said, I know what you meant. I said,
Yeah,
and sometimes
yeah.
it's having their own kids for them to understand.
Absolutely. Yes.
And the other thing is I said, well, wait till he becomes a teenager. I hope he does to you exactly what you did to me, and fortunately I have a good relationship with him. He works for me. But it's interesting because sometimes you don't realize these things until you have personally experienced certain things like that. So again,
That saying, walk a mile in somebody's shoes, it has a lot of gravity to it. Yes.
you always do. And
Yes.
and as I said, if you err on the side of being kind and considerate, is that such a bad thing?
Nope. It's always easier and better.
It is.
Be
It's
kind.
much. So what we're going to do next month, right, is part of the sessions that I went to at this Texas Winners meetings were really important. While fair housing is in April, and we're going to go through that, I'm going to talk to you about some of the things that were revealed in some of the sessions that Mitch and I both went to, where the experts, all the attorneys for Texas Realtors, Tech Commissioner, and those type of things. I need you to kind of be aware of certain things, just to kind of visit with it and some of the things that were brought up, so that you're aware of what's going on such various things, various topics and transactions that we have going on. All right, good people.
Wait a minute.
Huh?
I behaved through the whole thing.
You did.
Okay, for fair housing, isn't that like mandatory? I thought the whole office, didn't we used to have the whole office show up for fair housing?
You're supposed to. Yeah. The broker, here's the deal. When the broker has training and you don't go to it,
Right.
you're going to be in trouble, not the broker.
Right.
And so the broker can prove the various trainings that we do. And so that's what's important. And again, it's always on the agent. It's not on the broker. Now, if the broker never had these sessions, that's different, but they do. And so we'll make sure and take care of something like that.
Especially these new agents, I hear them saying some things. Sometimes I just shake my head. It's like, oh my God, I don't believe you just said that.
I know.
You know.
Mm.
it is unfortunate, as I said, it's revealed many times just inadvertently, like you said, you just overhear something on something like that. So, but next month in March, we're going to talk about the various topics that came up that were really important that I want to share with you from the Texas Winter Meetings. And then we'll do fair housing in April. All right.
Okay.
Well, I want everybody to go out there and have a wonderful, fabulous day. And I look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you,
Have a
ma'am.
good one.